Hi, Misha here, and you know what this is about. You see the title of the video, but Fox didn't when he came out, but he is a big fan of Glocks, so I brought him one of my kind of favorites. And it's one you've seen in a few videos here and there. It's got its original Tupperware box, complete with the not at all bad idea of ammunition storage in the box. Yeah. And the extra mag, cleaning rod. Of course, this is a Gen.1 17 full size with the original style magazines. And it actually is a non-updated internals and has the free-floating, non-captive recoil spring. But we'll look at all that later. But, you know, there's some bullets here. This isn't very safe. I know one way to get rid of them real quick. One reason I brought up my trusty Gen.1 for Fox to try is because very recently some police trade-in Gen.2 17s in the box hit the market. As you can see, not exactly a whole lot of difference, and Glock fans know. In fact, Glock themselves didn't really start using the whole generation thing until Gen 4. They just kind of let their fans do their thing. But yeah, since these came in, and they're pretty much identical guns except for a few minor differences and improvements, I figured, why not let him try them? Plus, you know, any excuse, right?
What do you think?
Clean run.
As always.
The Glock 17, G17 for short, named after the number of rounds in its magazine. Alrighty. I know, it's named after the 17th patent given to the Glock company. But I at least got a couple of you going, I bet. And we'll talk about the magazines, because this video really isn't about the history and all that. It's just early variations. And the G17 was totally, completely designed for Austrian Army trials, announced in 1980. In 1977, Austria really leaped ahead from their classic FAL to the Steyr AUG here, a gun that is modern today and was just ahead of its time in the 70s, including the polymer features. So in 80, they needed a new handgun to go with it because they'd been using older Walther P38s, P1s, HPs, what have you. It was time. And the competitors were the usual suspects. Steyr would submit their GB pistol. HK would be there. Sig Sauer would submit a variant in their 220 family. FN would hang about and submit something. And then there was Glock, to which most folks said, "Who's Glock?" Or, wait, the curtain manufacturer? In the 1960s, yeah, Glock made curtain rods and other kind of household goods. But they were at the forefront of polymers and plastics. And in the 1970s, they did manufacture elements of machine gun belts for the Austrian military. They also were actually well known in the field of cutlery for their knives. And an interesting fact about the Austrian army, they did not issue bayonets, but they did have, of course, combat knives. And Glock would start supplying a version to them. Here's one. Should have done this outside, but we lost daylight. So this was kind of their initial foray into military police. High quality, lightweight, relatively inexpensive, utility knives. Polymer frame, lightweight, phosphorated slide in the shape of a square. Relatively high capacity magazine, although even in 1980, 17+1 wasn't the highest capacity. In fact, Steyr's GB entry held 18+1. So that wasn't it. And of course, chambered for 9mm NATO, 9x19 Parabellum Luger, which has since kind of just become the cartridge of the world. And to begin with, that's what the only cartridge the Glock would be chambered for the first generation. But innovative, simple, clean lines, smooth, with this kind of pebble texture. In fact, the texture is not too dissimilar to what you see on the first generation AUGs, AUGs. And of course, to no one's surprise, in 1982, Glock was the winner. And it would take him a couple more years to kind of spool up for production. The Austrian military initially ordered 30,000, adopted as the P80. 1984, the design was finalized and full production ready to ramp and go by 1985. And even though it was designed for the Army, soon police were interested, and of course the civilian market would open up, especially in the USA. After development, by 1985, the design was pretty stable, and we wouldn't see a lot of changes until nearly 1990, except for, of course, one very famous early change.
Porch.
You hear that metal roof. The pencil barrel. The earliest guns had a very thin stainless steel barrel. Although from the get-go it had polygonal rifling, something that's kind of been unique for Glock, although they're certainly not the early ones to do it. HK's done it a lot too. But yeah, the first couple of years had a very thin barrel. But this was quickly changed by 85, maybe the very beginning of 86. And that's actually why these are so rare, and this is not a pencil barrel, I'm not saying it is. But officially, Glocks were not imported into the USA until January of 1986, although some guns dated late 85 came in that batch for obvious reasons. So the overlap of pencil barrel and US-American import, very small. But very soon they realized a super thin barrel wasn't great, so they would go to a phosphate finish on the outside and then chrome plating on the inside. And overall, it was a better choice. Lightweight's good and all, but you don't need a barrel that has issues. So, in addition to the bullet storage, which is of questionable, this case had one other feature, and I'm using that in quotes. There's no mag in the gun. Gun is clear. But because of this post here, basically, if you got it in there, and I hate to kind of force it, but if you just like crammed it in, it would fire itself because it only will go in with that post pushing the trigger back. And the theory was you could only put the gun in the case if it were uncocked. But the practice says if you just had it out like that and pushed it in hard,
You're going to shoot yourself.
you'd fire a hole. And luckily, this case does not have a hole in the side. I don't know how often that happened in reality, but I bet it happened more than zero.
Yeah.
Yeah. Glock, we made a great gun from the get-go that we're still doing today, but our cases needed a little work. Let's let Fox give this a try.
As always, Glock perfection.
So when I pulled that out, I asked if you owned a Gen.1, and you said no. So coming from a background of mostly shooting newer ones, what do you think about the original?
There's one problem that the original has that a lot of the newer Glocks don't, and that's the fact that the inside of your thumb, especially this top part of your thumb, does not rest very good. For anybody that knows, you're supposed to shoot a Glock with your thumb, so it looks something like this. Put your thumbs out. So whenever you do that on the Gen 1s, you put your thumbs out. This part of your thumb tends to ride up a little higher into this square piece. So if you take your Gen 2, Gen 3, Gen 4, you'll notice they do no longer have this square piece. And boy, let me tell you, it is uncomfortable. It's no wonder why a lot of people that were going into polymer guns and, you know, a combat style Tupperware pistol didn't think these were very comfortable. You get into the Gen 2s and up, you start getting that smoother square. But my gosh, that is uncomfortable.
I'm not sure what Fox is talking about. I've never have found the grip on the 17 to be that problematic. Here's the Gen 2 version. I guess it is cut a little different in the back because of the checkering and the more of a pattern here. There is more of a hump here. There's still a hump on this one, but maybe it is a little more rounded in that area. I did bring out my trusty old Gen 3 34, which is the same frame, just different slide. It has the thumb rests, and of course the grooves. Still has the cutout down here, which is nice. I definitely can see, I like the thumb rests. The finger grooves, fit me okay, but I could take or leave them. Thumb rests are nice though. What do you think? Which of the Glock generation ergonomics kind of fits you best?
Another cool thing you can see on the Gen 1, it didn't have the little serrations there to where you were supposed to put your thumbs to hold. You know, some people say don't lay your thumbs there. Some people say do. I prefer to just let my thumbs lay naturally, but if you have bigger thumbs, it'll
Of course,
sit
it's
there.
going to happen. You'll ding your thumb a bit. It's
Yeah,
not gonna break your thumb, nothing like that.
Yeah, I'm bad about resting my thumb against a Glock slide, but it's not going to stop it, and it's not going to hurt your thumb. You're just cramming your thumbs up in there trying to keep control of this lightweight gun. Yeah, I definitely can understand why a lot of the old school 1911 guys shot one of these and were used to holding their 1911 the way they were, and they didn't like it.
Glock was surprisingly a hit, not just within Austria or even Europe, but the USA. I think this took everyone a little bit by surprise. Police agencies really were drawn towards it, and I remember my brother first received one in the late 80s, and it was identical to this. The smooth grip and everything really stood out to me. Now, this is not a super early Gen 1. In fact, it's proofed, I think, March of 88. But what's nice about it, and the reason I kept it and actually sold the November of 87 one I had before, is that one had been updated. There was a voluntary recall. This one has not. Original parts. Plus it has its original case, as you already saw. The Gen 2 here, well, some sources say it appeared in 88, some say 89. Since Glock did not distinguish generations, it's hard to say. And there were some incremental changes. But externally, you kind of see the difference. The patterning, the texture, mostly apparent in that back strap area. Front too. And while we're looking at the serial plates, that's another interesting part of these. The European-made guns for the Austrian army and otherwise had no serial here. It was just on the slide barrel. But U.S. law, since this is the frame, requires one. That's why getting a pre-import one is essentially illegal in America because it doesn't have a serialization part. Even museums don't have true, BH Austrian Army P80s. Of course, the only difference between this and a P80 from the same era are the slide markings. But they had to add this plate. And the earlier ones were kind of a black color. This one's a little worn just through coming in and out of a holster, but it was originally blackened. Later on, they would go to a more standing out silver plate. The plate also protrudes from the frame just a little bit more. This is pretty flush fit. They also added a US suffix to the serial. And of course you have the, Glock patent and other markings. At this time, these are all in the 9mm caliber. In 1986, you had the G17 long slide, the L version joined the series. And of course, you also had the G18, the select fire version. But of course, again, those aren't really legal because they didn't come out until after the May of '86 closure of the machine gun registry. So if you find one, they tend to be a post-dealer sample. And yes, just before someone comments, there are literally a couple of dozen Gen 1 G19s. But for all intent and purposes, the G19, the compact version, started with Gen 2 here. And this style frame and everything came about 88, 89. It also introduced some internal changes, but not all at once. In fact, they would take a couple of years to sink in as feedback was given. I love how easy these come apart. The original generation internals were this kind of black-gray color. Again, with age, they might wear a little bit, cleaning. But then they discovered these guns weren't 100% drop safe. You have a floating firing pin here. Of course, there is a safety, but it's never 100%. So, around 1990, they started introducing updated internals, which tend to be more of a silver, kind of goldish silver because of heat treat. And this was just to make them more drop safe. Not sure if it picks up on camera. The ejector is a little bit different shape between these two. But more importantly, the disconnector, the sear portion back here in the rear, is more noticeably a different style and shape. And basically it kind of comes up and interacts higher into the slide with the tail of the firing pin. So if you drop the gun, it won't go bang. Here we have the recoil spring we all know and love in Glocks. Captive, easy in and out, no problems. But the original guns, up through around 91, had the kind of uncaptive, there we go, style here, with a rod that just comes out. Not a big detriment, but you have two pieces here, and you have one piece here, and this is easier to get in and out. A very small quality of life improvement, but a noticeable one. Some folks dog on the Glock trigger, and while it does have a bit of a staple gun feel, it's not bad. It really, really isn't for a duty gun, a service gun. Not a match gun, but, for that. Here's the Gen 2. It's a little heavier than on my Gen 1. They could just be what they put in. Could be the newer internals we talked about. Here's my Gen 3, and since this is a 34, it has the lightened spring. Yeah. That's actually a perfectly good trigger. It really is. Considering it's polymer on polymer. But this Gen 1, it's good, especially when you're shooting. I've noticed that with triggers. What seems a little not great at the bench, when you're actually out shooting and live firing and things are going off and you're excited and you're focused on other things, it just doesn't seem to matter as much. But what do you think? Do you notice triggers as much when you're live firing versus dry firing?
I will say that the trigger is quite well. A lot of people mouth the Glock trigger, but I shoot it so much that this Gen 1 is actually pretty nice. I would say this Gen 1 trigger is better than most Gen 4 and 5 triggers, partially due because it may have been broken in. Doesn't look like it had very many rounds through it.
One more literally small but very important improvement was made around the switch from Gen 2 to Gen 3 and had to do with the frame. Gen 1, we just have the one pin here, and with Gen 2 that would be carried on. But by the time of Gen 3 here, we have 2 pins. Boop. And another one. Can I reach there? That's the thing, some of these full-size Glocks are built for a slightly larger hand than mine. Still works after 30 plus years. The full-size Glocks are a little big for my hand. I do have relatively small hands, but it's not so much that I can't adapt to it, quite frankly. Just something I had to kind of get used to. That's for the 9mm. Now, I will say that the 45s, they're way too big for me. Now, the 19s and subsequent compact ones, like the 23, they do fit my hand a little better because what gets me is the more sharp angle backwards to the Glock and the larger palm swell. If this were a little more flush, I'd have an easier time with it. Again, it's not a deal breaker, not even close, but I really do appreciate how Walther introduced the swappable back straps with the P99. And of course, now Glock uses a version of that too because it's a great idea. But on the other hand, it's still reliable.
Of course it is. It's a Glock.
And works with modern ammo.
Yeah. Well, and
how is accuracy?
Accuracy's always good, man. I'm not saying I'm good, but I mostly can beat most people on a range if I've got a Glock in my hand. You just know them. Iron sights have always been consistent in the same gun. But
I have one thing to say.
Yeah.
Well, actually, they're not iron sights. They're made out of plastic.
They are made out of plastic, yeah. It's kind of unique, but although I haven't seen anyone break Glock iron sights, and I've used mine as a hammer multiple times, but...
Speak of the sights, early guns, probably done to comply with the points system, often shipped with so-called weekend sights. They were adjustable sights, and not like on the 34 here. These are at least usable combat style. Now, the weekend sights were, yeah, for weekend use. They weren't the strongest. They kind of overhung. They were neat in their own way, but they kind of ugly too. I have a set around here somewhere, but I couldn't find them. Just thought I'd mention that. But I had to tease Fox a bit there, because yeah, they are polymer sights, but they are strong.
Glock was so ahead of their time, people. Just look, even in a Gen 1, this flat top was just waiting for a red dot.
The early generation mags are what we kind of colloquially know as non-drop free, because they just kind of pop out a bit, especially when they're not full, and you need to grab them. There. Using the Gen 3 here, we can see a newer style mag and how very obviously just shoots out. Part of it is the added weight and bulk of the newer mags with more metal in it. And part of it probably is a change and fitment. Keep in mind the 17 was originally made to fulfill the Austrian military's requirements, not mine, not yours, and not even police. Not original. And another go since we still have a spare mag and a little bit of daylight.
Dude, what a great gun.
Yeah, not to mention the mags. Those are lightweight mags.
Yeah.
They started adding extra stuff. They're not even really drop free.
No, they're not. They
not like the newer ones where they just go
right. I will say something that I wouldn't mind if Glock did implement in their newer generations, and that's kind of the thumb hold strip here. Just trying to rip that magazine out, because even on modern Glocks, you know how sticky those mags are. That's why they make the counterweights and all that. But I do like that little lip right there where you can strip a mag out. The
magazine changed quite a bit over time. This is just 1, 2, and 3. And there are a couple of obvious external differences. Notice the step in the floor plate, which does continue on here, and then the thicker floor plate we're more used to today. Also the body, a little different shape. The notch in the back, this kind of U shape. And then more modern goes to the square. But if you look at the floor plate, there are a few other things. These two probably look very similar, and they are. But this one has the earlier style floor plate. This one has the second generation with this button here to remove the base. This one doesn't have it. Now, the earliest floor plates were essentially smooth, but very quickly the little Glock logo got installed. Logical. And of course, moving forward, we have the button, we get a patent number, other fun stuff. She held open.
But yeah, really cool. And honestly, this is kind of one that gets me giggity just because I really do like Glock. And to have a Gen 1, this is kind of a nostalgia thing. I'm not exactly the young generation that didn't get the Gen 1s. I could still remember when my oldest brother brought his home. But to be able to shoot one in this kind of condition and have love for Glock over really the last 20 plus years, it's kind of cool, man. This gets me excited.
Cool beans.
Yeah.
Appreciate you hanging out with us. Glock videos are not exactly a staple on this channel, nor do they need to be. I'm not an expert. Many more people know more than I do about these, but Fox is a fan. He'd never shot an early one. It was a good time. It was just something I did because I wanted to. And sometimes that's all the reason you need. But if not, getting these honestly pretty nice condition Gen 2s with the box and extra mags in, not a little bad motivator either. And honestly, with Gen 1s going for as much as they do now, I bought this long before the price jerked up. Gen 2s, in all practical terms, have the same features and even have that nice smooth grip. Just a little more texturing. And if you're wanting a shooter, these can be had for shooter prices. But, you know, they haven't made them since 1998 or so, so the Gen 2s will eventually go up as well, I'm sure. But what do you think? What's your favorite Glock generation? Let me know. Feel free to discuss below, because I know Glock guys, like me, like to talk. I'm not saying I'm a Glock guy, I'm a Walther guy. Although there's a cross thing with Horse West there. So, there's that. Not a Glock guy, but I'm a good gun, enjoy shooting guy, and sharing with friends and family. As always, if you could, please do like, share, and subscribe. Like to help support the channel, you know the dealio. Check out the link to Patreon. Fox and I recently did a Q&A and try to get together and do more videos as often as we can. I bet if I bring more Glocks out, I'd get him to come more often. What do you bet? This is Misha. Catch you very soon next time.